My name is Sharon Cooper. I am a member of the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation, the Education and History Committee. I am interviewing Sherry Williams. The veteran's name was James Fous. The date is 10 November, and we are in Bellevue, Nebraska at Bellevue University. All right, Ms. Williams.
Yes.
Go ahead and start with your story. Beginning with your brother's name and your relation to him.
Well, Jim was my older brother. His name is James William Fous, and he was named after two of my dad's veteran buddies from when Dad was in World War II. And what was the rest of you?
Your brother and you were the only siblings.
Yes, we were the only two siblings in the family.
Your dad was a veteran.
And my dad had been a veteran in World War II. He was in the U.S. Navy and fought in the invasion of Italy.
Tell about your mother trying to get him out of...
My mother, my father died 6 months before my brother. He had been ill for quite some time and succumbed to pneumonia eventually. He was only 53. Jim came home from boot camp for the funeral, but 6 months later, Jim was killed, and but prior to that, Mother had tried talking to a lawyer about getting him out of the assignment to Vietnam, not out of the Army, but just out of that assignment. Because he was the only son of an only son. And that did not come to fruition. He was sent to Vietnam. So our family name died out.
What high school did James go to?
Jim attended Omaha Central High School, graduated in 1964.
And was there any schooling that he had after that?
He attended Omaha University before it was part of the University of Nebraska for 2 years. He was majoring in business and accounting.
Good. Right. Did James have an assignment after basic training before he went to Vietnam, or did he go from basic training to Vietnam?
His basic training, I believe, was in Fort Lewis, Washington, and then he spent time at Fort Polk, Louisiana, for training.
Okay. And his military occupational specialty was infantry?
Infantryman.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. He had a medal about his marksmanship, that he was a sharpshooter.
Okay. All right. So, basic training, then Fort Polk, and then Vietnam. Right?
Yes.
How long was he in Vietnam before he was killed?
20 days.
All right.
He was on his first mission.
What did James enjoy doing before he went in the military?
Well, he belonged to Tau Kappa Epsilon fraternity at the University of Nebraska. And that was, he especially enjoyed being part of that. He was very social, and he became the pledge master his second year. He also was very interested in playing sports from young on. played in baseball. Seemed to have been one of his favorites. Football as well. He played in the Little League, and my dad was one of the coaches. And he also played American Legion baseball in high school. He was also on the varsity football team at Omaha Central and belonged to the, we called it the O Club, and it's really the Letterman's Club for his participation. He played tight end in high school.
So do you want to please list the awards that James received from his short time of service down here?
Well, I need that. He's got the lists. Okay. Okay. He received the Combat Infantryman Badge for serving in an infantry unit while engaged in active ground combat. He received the Bronze Star Medal for meritorious achievement in ground operations against hostile forces in Vietnam from the 25th of April 1968, to 14 May 1968. He received the Purple Heart for wounds received on the 14th of May 1968. He received the Good Conduct Medal for exemplary behavior, efficiency, and fidelity in an enlisted status while in active federal military service. He received the National Defense Medal for honorable active service. He received the Vietnam Service Medal for serving in Vietnam and contiguous waters or airspace. Vietnam Campaign Medal with 60 device presented by the government of the Republic of Vietnam for service against a common enemy. The Vietnam Gallantry Cross with palm presented by the government of the Republic of Vietnam for conspicuous gallantry against a common enemy. The Vietnam Military Merit Medal presented by the government of Vietnam for meritorious service while aiding the armed forces of the Republic. Expert Badge with machine gun bar for qualifying expert with machine gun. He was a sharpshooter badge with rifle and automatic rifle bar for qualifying sharpshooter with the rifle and automatic rifle.
Okay.
And he received the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Yes, he did. Okay, so if you could hold that up so that
Okay.
I can see it. All right.
How's this?
Go ahead.
Okay. This is a picture of my brother's boot camp class.
Okay. And then next is probably on the way to Vietnam.
Yeah, this is his picture on the way to Vietnam. They stopped in Hawaii, and I had given him a little Instamatic camera for Christmas that year, and he had someone take his picture, so this was in his camera when it was returned to us. This is a picture of my mother and I receiving the Congressional Medal of Honor. Excuse me. And we received, it was presented by President Nixon at the White House. And our congressman and our senator were there. And I think in the background here is my brother's commanding officer. I know he was present at the ceremony.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then could you explain this one also, please?
When Central High School decided to begin a Hall of Fame for students who had done great things, he was in, I think, the first class, or the first group that was honored, and this is the plaque that we received with his graduation picture on it.
Okay.
And
And that was done in 2000.
yes. And my family and I went to Central High School, where a large stone monument is on the west side of the school with his, it has the pictures and names of all the Central High students who died in Vietnam. And on the back side was the inscription of his Medal of Honor was inscribed on the stone. And we went, my son was young at the time, daughter was in college, so we went and received that at that time. This is a presentation of the medals that my brother received, except for the Medal of Honor, which I also have along. You didn't bring the citation.
Who made that for you? That
The collection of medals was put together by the head of the Nebraska National Guard. At the time, my mother and I went in 1970 to receive the medals in Washington, and Major Jarris made the set of medals for us and presented us to us at that time. And this is the Medal of Honor that he received for gallantry and meritorious service.
okay. Would you like to read the citation? We are a little short on time, so
Okay.
we have to lengthen it out.
His citation reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. PFC Fous distinguished himself at the risk of his life while serving as a rifleman with Company E. PFC Fous was participating in a reconnaissance and force mission when his unit formed its perimeter defense for the night. PFC Fous, together with 3 other American soldiers, occupied a position in a thickly vegetated area facing a wood line. PFC Fous detected 3 Viet Cong maneuvering toward his position, and after alerting the other men, directed accurate fire upon the enemy soldiers, silencing 2 of them. The 3rd Viet Cong soldier managed to escape in the thick vegetation after throwing a hand grenade into PFC Fous's position. Without hesitation, PFC Fous shouted a warning to his comrades and leaped upon the lethal explosive, absorbing the blast with his body to save the lives of the 3 men in the area at the sacrifice of his life. PFC Fous's extraordinary heroism at the cost of his life were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the U.S. Army." And it was my brother's first mission. He had been in Vietnam 20 days.
All right. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Okay, good. I've actually completed all of the questions that are on my list, so what I'd like you to do now is talk about you and James growing up and anything that you would like to say about him.
Prior to that, I want to say that when my brother was killed in action, my mother and I received a telegram saying that he was missing in action, not that he had been killed in action. And a high school friend of mine thought that I knew that he'd been killed in action, and he sent me the article from the Stars and Stripes newspaper that described what had happened. And Mother and I were very angry that we had been lied to. And so she and Dad were members of the VFW, Post 9551 in Omaha. And they worked through our mom worked through the VFW and eventually got my brother's commanding officer's name, and she had to write to him in order for him to write back to her and tell her what had happened. And we thought that was kind of a underhanded way of handling things.
So it had been published in the Stars and Stripes there in Vietnam before you found out.
Yes, yes. That was very hurtful, very hurtful. My brother and I, well, like I said, he was 2.5 years older than I, and I can remember seeing a picture that I have it somewhere of him when I was a tiny baby sitting on the living room couch, and he was holding me because I was the new baby in the house. And we experienced chicken pox together, running around in just our underwear and taking oatmeal baths. We both had our tonsils out at the same time. I was 5 and so he was 7. And we went to the hospital together. So those are some of the things I remember real young. And my dad, like I said, belonged to the Omaha Fire Department. And so did my grandpa and my Uncle Joe, great Uncle Joe. But the firemen always had a fireman's picnic every year. And we went to the picnic every year, and we thought we died and gone to heaven because they had like a horse trough or a tank, and it was filled with ice and every kind of soda pop you could think of, and we got to take as many as we wanted whenever we wanted. And that was one of the things I remember about the picnic. And we were in contests like three-legged race and that type of thing, so that was always a fun time. And like I said, when my brother was in Little League, Dad was one of the coaches, and Mom and I went to quite a few of the games, and we had a 53 Ford station wagon at the time, so Dad would load the whole team up into the wagon, and away they'd go. And it was mostly boys within our neighborhood that were on the team. And I guess I remember a time when I was in 5th grade that on my way home from school, some boys decided to be mean and throw snowballs at me and my friend as we walked home. We lived about 8 blocks from our elementary school, and it was a K-8 school, so my brother was still in that school. He was in 8th grade, and I got home and crying and telling him what to do, what had happened, and he and his friends went and found the boys and threw snowballs back at them. So I felt really special being protected by my brother. And then, like I said, he was in high school. I was in the pep club, so I got to see all of his football games. At that time, it just wasn't a thing for everybody's folks to go to every game, and so I don't think my folks attended any of the games at the time. And so I was very proud of him in school, and I was the nerd in the family, and he was the popular sports guy, charming and all that sort of thing.
The jokester, right? Wasn't he a jokester?
Yes, he could be a jokester. And then we went to the firemen's Christmas parties, and they always had one of the policemen, Bob Rice was his name, and he always dressed up as Santa Claus. And we would all get a stocking with an orange and an apple and some peanuts and hard candy in it. And then when my dad passed away and Bob Rice attended my dad's funeral, my brother greeted him because he had come home from boot camp to attend the funeral. And he greeted Bob Rice with, "Hi Santa, how are you?" And Bob took a lot of pride in that. So it's quite hurtful to try to remember a lot of other things. I felt pretty good about when he was in college and I was a junior in high school. He asked me to accompany one of their pledges to a fraternity party, and I felt very grown up going to that. And he wrote to me when he was in boot camp, and when I was in college. He drove me to college. When I first started college, I went to college at Tarkio College in Tarkio, Missouri, just south of Shenandoah, Iowa. And I remember him carrying my things up to my room. And that was one of the last big things we did together. One thing that I do remember when he was in college, and I was at home, my mother got a phone call one night about midnight, and it was the Douglas County Hospital. And my brother and some of his fraternity dudes were at Memorial Park, where we go for a ceremony tomorrow. And they got into a fight with some other guys up there, and he got a front tooth knocked out. And my mother, she nearly passed out when she got that phone call, but you know, it wasn't nearly as severe as later on. But I do remember then she had to get him a new tooth, and so he had a nice smile again.
Anything else?
It's good for me.
Good. Okay, well, let's go ahead and shut it off and let you think a little more, because we still need about 9 minutes. Okay.
Okay, this is a certificate of honor given to soldiers who are buried in national cemeteries. And I had to apply for this. At the time, my son was working for Senator Tom Harkin, and Tom Harkin's office helped me retrieve the death certificate that was needed to apply for this, because we didn't have that since he was killed in action. And so the senator's office helped do that. My brother and my dad and my mother are all buried at Fort McPherson National Cemetery out near North Platte, Nebraska. And at the time that Dad died, he wanted to always be buried in a national cemetery, so that's where he was buried. Well, then 6 months later, my brother was killed and Mom wanted him buried in the same cemetery. And in a national cemetery, they don't save spots. It's one right after the other in chronological order. Well, it had only been 6 months between my dad and my brother, and my brother is buried right next to my dad in the plot right next to him. And then when my mom passed away, of course, she was buried in Dad's plot, and her name is carved on the back. So my immediate family are all in the same place. Fort McPherson started as a national cemetery during the Indian Wars in the 1870s. So there's some real history there.
There is.
Yeah, I've been there several times.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead and talk about tomorrow.
Tomorrow, Veterans Day 2022, my brother will be honored by the city of Omaha by having a street named after him that runs in front of the high school, Omaha Central High School. The project started as a service project by the junior ROTC at the high school. And I don't know, it took them 1 or 2 years to go through all the paperwork and jump through all the hoops. And then toward the end, the Vietnam veterans of Nebraska got involved to help move things along, because they, it had been 50 years and he still wasn't being honored in this way. So the city council and the Omaha Planning Board and the mayor all did their part. And tomorrow the sign will be posted on 24th and Davenport, and it will become James Fous Street. And then I will be given a copy of the street sign. So a lot of people worked very hard to make that all come to fruition. I didn't know that was going on for a long time. The ROTC kids hadn't said anything to me, and it was quite moving.
The president of the board, city board, his name is Pete Festerson. He announced that at a event that I was at last week, and it had just happened, so he was pretty excited about it.
Yes, it like I said, it took a long time going, but then it all came together very quickly. And they wanted to get it done so that this could be done on Veterans Day this year. One thing I'd forgotten to mention, like I said, my dad was a city fireman. My grandpa had been a captain in the city fire department, and my great uncle Joe had been a captain in the city fire department. And when my brother was killed, the VFW Post 9551 Omaha Police and Firemen pushed to have the new, at that time, Omaha Training Center for the fire department. It was on Abbott Drive. It has since been moved, but they pushed to have it named after my brother, and they had a lovely sign, and my mother and I went to the ceremony, and let's see, yeah, I can't remember.
1970.
Was it 70?
Yeah, but the top, I think,
Oh,
said
yeah,
70.
July 11th, 1970, which was the same year that Mother and I went to Washington, D.C. We went in April and received the Medal of Honor at that time. And that was, we were glad that we had had 3 years to get used to the idea that he was gone, because 21 others were awarded the Medal of Honor at that time, and some of them it had been so recent they didn't enjoy their time in DC, but we were guests of the government for 2 days and 3 nights. And we saw a lot of sights in Washington and had the ceremony at the White House to receive the medal.
Can you do a couple minutes on the book?
Sure.
Maybe you went to see the Vietnam Memorial completed in Washington.
Oh, yes.
Much later.
The Vietnam Memorial that's in Washington, D.C. My son now lives in Washington, D.C. And so when we've gone to visit him, we have seen the wall several times and located his name on it. I had a great niece who did a school project and went out there, and she wrote a little paper on him for her school project and took a rubbing of his name. We also looked up the name of his best friend, one of his best friends at the time, Larry Caldwell. They were drafted at the same time, and they were fraternity brothers. And Larry died a few days before my brother, and he was killed by sniper fire. And so neither one of them had been in Vietnam more than a matter of weeks. Very sad. This book was compiled by the Omaha World Herald, and they were commemorating the Vietnam War. And my brother has a section in here. Did you take the paper out? Marker out?
It's still in there.
Oh, here it is. And so, as they talk about the Vietnam War, this is his picture and a picture of his medal, and some others that have received the medal. And probably one of the best known people that received the medal from Nebraska was Bob Kerrey, who later became a senator. And he's on the next page. But the Omaha World Herald sent me a copy of this book so that I would have his story in their book.
Okay. I think we've got enough now.
I hope so. Oh gosh.
Okay, go ahead.
My brother saved 3 other men, and the leader of his patrol was a man named John Sharp. And when he returned from Vietnam, he was in a very bad place, remembering what had happened. And his wife encouraged him to call my mother and talk to her. He was a little bit afraid of that, because worrying that she would be very angry. But that was not the way my mom was. And she used a very soft voice and told him, thank you for calling, and they talked about it, and there was really nothing to forgive him for. It was not his fault. And he continued to send her pictures of his children, one of which was named after my brother. I think it was his first child. Was Morgan James. And he continued to send my mom Christmas cards and Mother's Day cards until she passed away in 1981. And then just recently, in the past year, a young man named Larry Reed, who was another of the men in the group that were saved, called me. He now lives in Nashville, Tennessee. I guess he wrestled with this for a long time with his life, in his life too. But he's in pretty good shape right now, it seemed. And he said, I only knew your brother a few days, but I remember everything he told me. He said we both had sisters, younger sisters, that we felt very protective of. And he had given my brother a watch that the time glowed in the dark for while he was on duty. And he said, you know, after he jumped on the grenade, they never did find the watch. But Larry is planning to come to Nebraska when the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial is being dedicated.
Great.
So I'm excited to meet him in person, because he says now, because my brother saved him, he's having a very good life. And it's taken him a while not to feel guilty about that.
Mhm. Is that everything now? All right. They're going, oh, this lady's crazy.